The Buddhist temple stood serene at the foot of a majestic mountain, where the wind whispered ancient stories to the trees. The air was heavy with incense, drifting lazily through the sun-dappled courtyard. Inside, the heart of the temple lay a statue of the Buddha, a revered symbol of peace and wisdom. An elderly monk, his robe worn with age, knelt before the statue, his trembling hands clasped in prayer. The weight of the moment was immense, as if time itself had stopped. Suddenly, with a deafening crash, the statue toppled from its pedestal, shattering its face upon the stone floor. The monk's breath caught in his throat, his body trembling with shock. His hands reached out to touch the pieces, a deep sadness in his eyes. "The world is changing," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "But what is left of us?" Arjuna, a young monk, paced through the temple's corridors. His face was calm, yet his heart carried a weight that he couldn't shake. He had spent years at this temple, following the teachings of the Buddha, practicing meditation, and embracing asceticism, yet something felt missing. There was an emptiness within him that his daily rituals could not fill. His feet moved mechanically, as though on autopilot, and as he walked past the silent halls, he could almost hear the whisper of doubt in his mind. The temple had always been a sanctuary, a place where time seemed to stand still, yet now it felt suffocating. His longing for something deeper echoed in the silence. Was there more to the teachings than what had been handed down to him? Was there a truth he had yet to find? Arjuna stopped before a window, looking out over the temple's tranquil garden, the pond shimmering in the soft sunlight. Is there more to life than this? He thought to himself. The garden was a place of calm, yet Arjuna could not find peace there. As he stood by the edge of the pond, the ripples on the water seemed to mock him, distorting the once perfect reflection of the Buddha statue. The serene image now seemed broken, just like his own sense of self. He stared at the fractured reflection, pondering the meaning of his existence. Venerable Shashi, the temple's abbot, approached silently, his footsteps barely audible on the stone. The older monk had always been a guiding figure to Arjuna, but today, his presence felt heavy. "Arjuna," Shashi's voice was gentle but firm. "I have been thinking. It is time for you to take on a leadership role within the temple." Arjuna turned to face him, his heart pounding. "I am not ready, Venerable. I do not even understand my own heart." Shashi smiled softly, the wisdom of years etched in his eyes. "Perhaps, Arjuna, it is time for you to learn." Arjuna's heart swirled with uncertainty. How could he take on such a responsibility when he felt lost within himself? As he walked the temple grounds later that day, he overheard two monks deep in conversation. Their words, though hushed, piqued his interest. "Have you heard? There is an ancient scroll hidden in the archives. It speaks of a path to enlightenment that goes beyond the Buddha's teachings." The other monk nodded. "Yes, but it is forbidden. To seek it could mean exile from the temple." Arjuna's pulse quickened. The allure of forbidden knowledge pulled at him. What if this scroll held the key to the truth he had been searching for? He knew he must find it, but at what cost? His heart was torn between the stability of tradition and the unknown depths of this new path. The evening came, and with it, a sense of urgency. Arjuna's mind was made up. He would venture into the forbidden archives to uncover the truth. The temple had its rules, but Arjuna was beyond them now. His heart, restless and aching, sought something greater than the teachings he had been raised with. He walked cautiously through the dim hallways of the temple, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows. As he approached the archives, he hesitated, feeling the weight of the monks' gaze upon him, even though they were not present. With a deep breath, he entered the archives, the heavy door creaking in protest. Dust particles danced in the air as he made his way to the farthest shelf, where the forbidden scroll was said to be hidden. His hand trembled as he reached for it. This was a moment he would never be able to undo. Arjuna's fingers trembled as he unfurled the ancient scroll, its parchment brittle with age. The teachings within were not those of the Buddha, but something older, darker. Words spoke of a path that promised enlightenment through detachment, but at a great cost, the destruction of one's humanity. Arjuna read the lines over and over, his mind swirling with confusion and fear. Could this truly lead to a deeper truth? His gaze flickered nervously toward the door, his heart racing. The temple was quiet, but the weight of forbidden knowledge pressed against his chest. If I choose this path, he thought, I may never return to the life I knew. The scroll felt alive in his hands, as though it were calling to him, urging him to understand its secrets. Was this the answer he had been seeking, or was it a dangerous temptation? The weight of the scroll's contents pressed heavily on Arjuna's mind as he wandered through the temple grounds. The evening air was cool, and the once familiar surroundings now felt alien to him. He passed the pond, its surface undisturbed, reflecting the starlit sky above. Yet within his heart, turbulence raged. His mind raced with questions. How could he reconcile this new knowledge with the teachings he had followed all his life? He sat by the edge of the water, staring into the stillness, seeking clarity. Venerable Shashi's voice echoed in his mind. The true path to enlightenment lies in letting go of all desire, including the desire for enlightenment itself. Was this ancient scroll truly a path to wisdom, or was it a dangerous detour leading him further from his true self? Arjuna closed his eyes, hoping for a sign, but the silence was all that greeted him. The following days passed in a blur of uncertainty. Arjuna could not escape the pull of the scroll. He began to feel the weight of the choice before him more than ever. One morning, as he meditated in the temple's quiet courtyard, a sudden voice broke through his concentration. You've read it, haven't you? Arjuna opened his eyes to see Venerable Shashi standing before him, his gaze penetrating. I knew you would find it eventually, the abbot said, his tone soft yet firm. The scroll is not meant to be read. It is a test, a temptation. The true path is not through knowledge or destruction, but through understanding and surrender. Arjuna's heart raced. He opened his mouth to speak, but words failed him. Shashi's eyes softened. The teachings you seek are not outside of you, Arjuna. They are within. You must look inward, not outward. Arjuna's heart was heavy with doubt. He had always looked to the Buddha's teachings for guidance, yet now, the very foundation of his beliefs was being shaken. He wandered through the temple, passing the serene gardens and the quiet chambers where monks prayed, but none of it felt real anymore. The scroll, its secrets burning in his mind, seemed to whisper to him from the deepest recesses of his thoughts. Was he ready to abandon everything he had known in search of something deeper? As he passed by the temple bell, the soft ringing echoed in the distance, reminding him of the life he had chosen, a life of discipline, purity, and devotion. Yet, something inside him yearned for more. The stillness of the temple no longer brought peace, it suffocated him. Is this all there is? He wondered. In the dead of night, Arjuna returned to the forbidden archives, his resolve firm. He could no longer ignore the pull of the scroll. He knew that, by seeking it, he was risking everything, but the yearning for truth was too strong to resist. As he entered the darkened room once more, the ancient scroll lay waiting on the shelf, almost as if it had been calling to him. His hand shook as he unrolled it again, reading the words that promised a path of transcendence, a path that would strip away all attachment, even the attachment to self. But as the words sank deeper into his soul, a sudden realization gripped him. The price of this enlightenment was the destruction of everything he had known, everything he had believed in. Could he truly walk this path? Was the cost too high? Arjuna closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his decision pressing down on him. Arjuna stood at the temple's entrance, the weight of his decision heavy on his heart. The dawn light bathed the courtyard in a soft glow, but within, a storm raged. He had read the scroll's teachings over and over, each line sinking deeper into his consciousness. He had longed for truth, for something beyond the teachings of the Buddha, but the path he was contemplating was fraught with peril. To detach from everything, to cast away his humanity, meant to surrender all that he was. Was it worth it? Was there a deeper truth within these teachings, or was it a dangerous lie? His mind was torn, and as the morning bell tolled, he felt as if he were standing at the edge of a precipice. One step forward, and there would be no turning back. But his heart, restless and yearning, pushed him toward the unknown. The days following his decision were filled with a sense of unease. Arjuna could feel the change within himself, a shifting of thoughts and desires. The scroll's teachings had begun to take root in his mind, whispering to him during moments of stillness, urging him to detach from all worldly concern. But as the days passed, he found himself increasingly isolated. The temple, once a place of comfort, now felt like a prison. The monks' faces, once familiar and filled with compassion, now seemed distant, as though they were mere shadows in his life. Arjuna sought solace in the quiet corners of the temple, but the emptiness inside him only grew. Was this the enlightenment he had sought? Or had he sacrificed his humanity in the process? The question gnawed at him, unanswered, as he continued down the path of detachment. One evening, as Arjuna sat in meditation beneath an ancient tree, Venerable Shashi approached him quietly. The abbot had been watching Arjuna from afar, noticing the change in him, the growing distance between him and the world around him. "Arjuna," Shashi said, his voice low and filled with concern, "I see that you have taken the scroll's teachings to heart. But do you understand the cost of this path?" Arjuna opened his eyes slowly, meeting Shashi's gaze. "I seek truth, Venerable," he replied softly. "The path of detachment calls to me. I must follow it." Shashi shook his head, a deep sadness in his eyes. "Detachment without compassion is not enlightenment, Arjuna. It is emptiness. You must find balance, not destruction." The words struck Arjuna like a blow, but his heart, already on the path, resisted. "I must continue," he whispered, though doubt lingered in his voice. The following night, the temple was thrown into chaos. Arjuna had made his choice, and he could no longer hide from the consequences. As he walked through the temple, a strange calm washed over him. The monks, once companions in his journey, now seemed like strangers. His footsteps echoed through the empty halls, the sound sharp in the silence. In the distance, he heard the faint tolling of the bell, and something inside him snapped. The knowledge he had sought, the truth he had longed for, had come with a price. His heart felt hollow, and yet he could not turn back. As he stood in the temple's inner sanctum, the weight of his decision crushed him. Had he made a mistake? Was he too far gone to return to the teachings he once believed in? The question lingered in his mind, but it was too late to turn back now. The following morning, Arjuna stood in the courtyard, staring out at the peaceful garden. The birds sang, the wind whispered through the trees, but inside there was only silence. The emptiness he had sought now surrounded him like a thick fog. He had detached from everything, the monks, the teachings, even his own emotions, but in doing so, he had lost the very thing that had once connected him to the world. His heart, once full of longing for truth, now felt cold and distant. He closed his eyes, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. Was this the enlightenment he had sought, or was it simply the destruction of all that he had been? Arjuna sighed, feeling a deep sense of loss. The path ahead was unclear, and yet there was no turning back. He had crossed the threshold, and now he must face the consequences of his choice. The temple was in turmoil, though its outer calm remained undisturbed. Inside, Arjuna could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Venerable Shashi had confronted him, and the words they had exchanged echoed in his mind. "You cannot let go of your humanity," Shashi had said, his voice a mix of sadness and warning. "Without compassion, there is no enlightenment." Arjuna had wanted to reject the old monk's words, to silence the nagging voice that questioned his path, but a small part of him had listened. It was that part that now spoke louder than ever. Was he truly on the right path, or had he sacrificed his soul for an illusion of truth? He walked the temple grounds in a daze, the weight of his choices pressing against him. The ancient teachings he had once revered now felt like chains binding him to a destiny he didn't want. As Arjuna sat in meditation that evening, he felt the familiar pull of detachment. The teachings of the scroll had taken root deep within him, and for a time, it had felt like liberation. Yet now, in the stillness of the evening, he realized that his heart had grown cold, his connection to the world severed. The air around him seemed to grow heavier, the silence more suffocating. He thought of the monks who had been his brothers, of Venerable Shashi, and of the Buddha's teachings he had so eagerly embraced in his youth. Had he abandoned them all for something that could never fulfill him? Arjuna's mind wandered back to the temple's bell, its toll echoing across the mountains. The sound had always comforted him, a reminder of his place in the world, but now it only reminded him of what he had lost. He had chosen the path of detachment, but now he wondered if he had lost himself in the process. Arjuna's struggle continued in silence. The monks had begun to notice the change in him, but none dared speak of it openly. Only Venerable Shashi continued to watch him closely, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and knowing. One afternoon, as Arjuna stood by the temple's stone wall, the abbot approached him. "You have not found what you sought, have you?" Shashi's voice was gentle but unyielding. Arjuna turned to face him, his eyes clouded with doubt. "I thought I had," he whispered. "I thought the detachment would set me free, but instead it feels as though I am sinking deeper into emptiness." Shashi nodded solemnly. "The path you seek is not one of destruction, Arjuna. Enlightenment is not a severing of ties but a deepening of understanding." Arjuna's heart ached with the weight of Shashi's words. Could it be true? Was he chasing a false path? That night, Arjuna returned to the temple's quiet inner sanctum, his heart heavy with the words Shashi had spoken. He had thought the teachings of detachment would lead him to some higher state of being, but instead they had left him empty, alone. The temple, once a place of peace and solace, now felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in around him, the silence deafening. Arjuna stood before the Buddha statue, his mind awash with conflicting thoughts. Was the path of detachment truly the right one, or had he misunderstood its meaning? He knelt before the statue, his hands clasped in prayer. He had sought to transcend the world, but now, he realized, he had lost the ability to feel the world at all. "What have I become?" he whispered to the statue, the words echoing in the empty room. As dawn broke, Arjuna found himself standing once again at the edge of the temple grounds, the first light of the morning painting the world in hues of gold and orange. He had spent the entire night reflecting on his journey, on the choices he had made. The pull of the scroll, the allure of detachment, had seemed so powerful, so convincing, but now, standing here, he could see the cost of his decisions. The world he had once sought to escape still called to him, its beauty, its pain, its joy, all intertwined in a way he had failed to see. He had sought to transcend the human experience, but in doing so he had abandoned the very thing that made life worth living. The bell tolled in the distance, a reminder of the temple's constant rhythm, but now it felt like a call to return to himself. Arjuna knew that his path had not ended, but had only just begun. Arjuna stood at the temple's entrance, gazing out at the world beyond. The vast mountains stretched endlessly before him, the valley below covered in a blanket of mist. He had spent so many years within these walls, following the teachings, seeking answers, but now it seemed as though those answers were slipping through his fingers. The peace he had once felt in meditation no longer brought him solace. The solitude he had craved now felt like a prison. The scroll's teachings had promised liberation, but all it had brought was emptiness. He thought of the Buddha, of Venerable Shashi, and the monks who had always been by his side. In his search for a deeper truth, had he missed the simplest truth of all? That enlightenment was not found through detachment alone, but through connection to the world, to others, and to the self. As Arjuna walked through the temple, the familiar sights and sounds began to shift. The once quiet halls now felt alive with energy, the monks going about their daily tasks, the gentle hum of the temple's activities filling the air. Arjuna had always believed that peace could only be found in isolation, but now he saw that it was in the connections with others that true peace resided. He approached Venerable Shashi, who sat peacefully in the courtyard, his eyes closed in meditation. The abbot's presence was a comfort, like a steady anchor in a storm. "Venerable," Arjuna began, his voice quiet. "I have learned much, but there is still much more to understand. I have been seeking enlightenment in detachment, but now I see that I must find balance." Shashi opened his eyes, his gaze soft but knowing. "Balance, Arjuna, is the key to understanding the true nature of the self." Arjuna spent the next few days reflecting on Shashi's words. He meditated in the garden, sat by the temple's pond, and pondered the nature of detachment and connection. The more he thought, the more he realized that enlightenment wasn't a singular path, but a journey of balance. He could not detach from everything and expect to find peace. Instead, he needed to embrace the world as it was, with all its imperfections. The temple, the monks, the teachings, they were not obstacles to enlightenment but integral parts of the journey. As Arjuna sat in quiet reflection, he felt a calm settle within him. The restlessness that had once plagued him had begun to subside, replaced by a deeper understanding. He had not found the answers he sought by fleeing from the world, but by accepting it, flaws and all. The temple bells tolled, signaling the beginning of a new day. Arjuna stood before the Buddha statue, his heart full of gratitude and clarity. He had once seen the statue as a symbol of his own unattainable goal, but now it felt like a mirror, reflecting his own path to enlightenment. The teachings of the Buddha were not meant to be rigidly followed but to serve as a guide. True enlightenment, Arjuna realized, was not about escaping the world or the self, but about understanding both in their entirety. It was not about rejecting the worldly desires, but understanding their place in the greater whole. With a deep bow, Arjuna offered a silent prayer, not for answers, but for the wisdom to live the path he had discovered. He had finally come to understand that enlightenment was not an end, but a continuous journey of growth and understanding. The days passed, and Arjuna began to embrace his role within the temple once more. He found joy in the simple tasks, whether it was helping the other monks with their duties or engaging in quiet meditation. He was no longer a prisoner of his own expectations or the teachings of the scroll. He had learned to live fully within the world, not apart from it. One afternoon, as he walked through the temple's gardens, he caught sight of a young monk, his face full of uncertainty. Arjuna approached him and smiled, offering a kind word of encouragement. "The path is not always clear, but you must trust yourself," Arjuna said. The young monk nodded, grateful for the guidance. Arjuna had learned that the true path to enlightenment was not through rigid teachings or detached existence, but through connection, compassion, and understanding of both self and others. He had found peace. Arjuna woke before dawn, the temple still and quiet around him. As he stood by the window, gazing out at the mountains bathed in the soft glow of early light, a sense of peace washed over him. His journey had been long and full of doubt, but now, in the silence of the morning, he felt as though he had come full circle. The teachings of detachment, once so alluring, had led him down a winding path of confusion and loss. But now, standing before the world, he realized that his true path was not about renouncing the world, but embracing it with wisdom and compassion. He had learned that enlightenment was not a destination, but a way of being with others, with the self, and with the world. As the first rays of light touched the temple, Arjuna felt ready for whatever came next. His journey was no longer about escaping the world, but about living in it fully, with awareness and peace. Later that day, Arjuna found himself walking through the temple gardens, the scent of jasmine and fresh earth filling the air. He passed by the pond, its waters calm and undisturbed, reflecting the trees above like a perfect mirror. Arjuna had often meditated by this pond in the past, seeking clarity and peace, but today it felt different. As he stood by the water's edge, he realized that his perspective had shifted. The world around him, once seen as an obstacle to enlightenment, now appeared as an integral part of his journey. His thoughts were no longer clouded with desires or detachment. He saw the beauty in the present moment, in the small things, the ripples on the pond, the way the light played through the leaves. Arjuna smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for everything he had experienced. His path, once uncertain, had now become clear. As the days passed, Arjuna began to take on a more active role within the temple. He worked alongside the monks, helping them with their duties, engaging in meaningful conversations, and sharing his experiences. He no longer sought to escape the world, but found joy in being part of it. One afternoon, as he sat with a group of monks, the conversation turned to the nature of enlightenment. Enlightenment is not something to be attained, Arjuna said, his voice steady and calm. It is not a distant goal, but a state of being in the present, a deep awareness and acceptance of the world as it is. The monks listened intently, and Arjuna could see the spark of understanding in their eyes. He realized that his journey had not only led him to self-awareness, but also to a deeper understanding of how to share that wisdom with others. He had found his purpose. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Arjuna sat alone in the temple's inner sanctum. The stillness of the room, coupled with the soft glow of candlelight, brought him a deep sense of peace. He had spent so many years searching for something outside of himself, but now he understood that the answers had always been within. The Buddha's teachings, Venerable Shashi's wisdom, and his own experiences had all led him to this moment of realization. Enlightenment was not something that could be grasped or held onto. It was a continuous process, a way of being that was not fixed but ever-changing. Arjuna felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey he had undertaken. He had learned that true peace comes not from escaping the world but from embracing it, fully and without resistance. As the last light of the day faded, Arjuna closed his eyes, his heart at peace. The next morning the temple bell tolled, signaling the start of a new day. Arjuna stood outside the temple, watching as the sun rose over the mountains. It was a new beginning, not just for the day but for him as well. He had let go of his search for a distant, unattainable enlightenment, and had come to realize that true peace was already within him. He had learned to see the world with new eyes, to appreciate the simple moments, and to connect with others in a deeper way. As he stood there, the monks around him began their morning rituals, their movements calm and purposeful. Arjuna smiled, feeling a deep sense of belonging and peace. He had come home, not just to the temple, but to himself. The journey was far from over, but now Arjuna knew that it was a journey he was ready to walk, with humility, compassion, and understanding. The morning mist clung to the temple as Arjuna stood in front of the Buddha statue, bathed in the soft light of dawn. It had been a long journey to this moment, one that had taken him through doubt, confusion, and moments of deep introspection. But now, standing here in the early morning silence, he felt a sense of peace he had never known before. The teachings of the Buddha were not abstract ideas to be grasped, nor were they a distant goal to achieve. They were a way of life, a way of being. Arjuna had spent years seeking something outside of himself, but he had come to realize that the answers he had sought were always within. As he stood before the statue, Arjuna no longer sought enlightenment as a destination. He understood now that it was a journey that did not have an end, but a continuous unfolding in every moment. Arjuna walked through the temple's gardens, feeling the warmth of the sun slowly burning away the remnants of the morning mist. He had once thought that to find peace, he had to detach from everything, to sever himself from the world. But now, as he moved through the blooming flowers and watched the monks at their morning rituals, he realized how deeply interconnected everything was. The world was not something to escape. It was something to embrace, with all its imperfections and beauty. He stopped to watch a group of young monks practicing their meditation, their faces calm and focused. Arjuna smiled, knowing that this was where true peace lay, not in isolation or detachment, but in connection and understanding. With a heart full of gratitude, he realized that the teachings of the Buddha were not to be followed blindly, but understood in the context of one's own life and experiences. Later, as the sun began to set, Arjuna sat outside the temple, watching the golden hues of the evening sky. He thought back to the moment when he had first picked up the forbidden scroll, seeking something beyond the Buddha's teachings. That scroll had led him on a path of suffering and confusion, but it had also brought him to the realization that enlightenment was not something that could be gained through knowledge alone. It was a matter of being present, of fully embracing each moment, each breath, and each connection. The scroll, once seen as a source of truth, had only been a distraction, a temptation to seek something outside of himself. Now, Arjuna understood that the greatest wisdom was found not in external teachings, but in the quiet moments of self-reflection and acceptance. As night fell, and the temple settled into its quiet rhythm, Arjuna stood at the edge of the temple's balcony, looking out over the valley below. The lights of distant villages twinkled in the distance, and the stars began to fill the sky, one by one. Arjuna had spent so much of his life searching for answers in the external world, looking for something that would give his life meaning. But now, as he looked at the vastness of the night sky, he realized that the answers he had sought were never outside of him. They had always been within. The stars, the mountains, the very air he breathed, they were all part of the same truth. Enlightenment was not a goal, but a continuous unfolding of understanding, a way of being fully present in the world. He had come to understand that peace was not something to be attained, but something to be embodied. The bell tolled, signaling the dawn of a new day. Arjuna stood at the edge of the temple grounds, watching as the first light of morning began to illuminate the world around him. The path he had walked had been long and full of challenges, but he had finally come to a place of understanding. Enlightenment, he now knew, was not a destination, but a journey. It was not about escaping the world, but fully embracing it, with all its suffering and joy, its beauty and pain. As the temple came to life with the sounds of morning prayers and the monks began their rituals, Arjuna felt a deep sense of gratitude for the teachings, for the temple, and for the journey that had brought him to this moment. He had found peace, not in the search for something outside himself, but in the acceptance of who he was, right here, right now.